Hi, I'm Christine Tulley, executive writing coach and president of Defend and Publish. This is episode 46, using Asana to manage a big revision. One of the things that I've learned about doing writing project management as an area of research interest is that there are tools to help manage projects and systems to help manage projects. And then there's also the mental game and the writing that you use on your own to manage your projects. So that might look like something like a Post-it note where you track out 3 different ways you might want to revise a project, or some audio notes about what you need to do. You might have email that talks about different revisions that need to happen in a back and forth exchange with collaborators. And so project management tools like Trello and Asana and some of these other the system/digital tools that are out there can be used for academia. And I was very interested in trying one. So I decided to try Asana. And I'm going to show a couple pictures of what I ended up doing with it so you can see how it works if you have not used this tool before. But I want to let you know that it does seem to be quite a bit of a debate over all of the project management systems that are out there that you can get as digital tools. And so I found a very helpful video on YouTube that explained the difference between Trello and Asana for academic projects. So I'll link to that video in the show notes, because many of the videos that explain both Trello and Asana and some of the other systems are more designed for the corporate workplace. But I was very interested to see if this is something that I would be interested in for an academic project. So after watching the video, I was convinced that Asana is the way to go, at least for me, and I'm going to show you why. So I have some notes that will actually show you what I ended up doing with it. One of the things that I decided to use it for was to think about Asana as a tool that could be used to manage a big revision. One of the revisions I'm working on right now that I talked about in episode 44 was a revision of a book manuscript that I'm working on. And I got some pretty substantial feedback to make this ready for publication. So I was excited by the feedback, but there was a lot of it and it was pretty tangled up. So one of the things I was hoping that Asana could do was teach me how to, well, not teach me, maybe that's not the right word, organize how I might approach this big revision, because I wanted to try to have all of my revisions finished within 8 weeks was what I was looking at. So I'm going to show you how I ended up doing this. And I was a first-time Asana user. So the pictures that you're seeing are captures of what it looked like for me. And for those of you that are on podcast and not or on listening to this in an audio version, I will describe what you're looking at. But for this episode, I definitely recommend taking a look at the YouTube video so you can see what actually happened, because I knew nothing about Asana other than watching that short video that I believe was around 8 minutes long. It wasn't very long. So the first thing that I did before I ever used Asana is something I do with every revision. And this is something that I talked about, or every revise and resubmit. This is something I talked about in episode 44. But one thing that I like to do is, of course, when I get an email back with feedback or a decision about an article or a manuscript, of course, I read it and then read through it again and again, on my phone or on my computer somewhere. But I do like to sit with the revision advice for a couple of weeks, at least, if I have that kind of time, and at least a week, only because in the, kind of the heat of the moment, sometimes I'm not remembering everything, or I'm just not reading it in a very organized way. But the next thing that I do is during one of my writing sessions, I use a writing session to plan. And I know that I've also done a podcast episode about using a writing session to plan. I do not remember the number, but I will put it in the show notes for you. So this is a picture of me using a writing session to plan. I went to a very nice coffee shop, one that I don't go to very often. And I sat down for 2 hours, read the 2 reviews I had, and also the editor's letter that synthesized the reviews, but also added some suggestions. And then I made a list. And so what this picture is showing is an empty cup of coffee that was amazing, by the way, and my handwritten notes with numbers. And so what I did is every time I found something I needed to do across those 3 things, those 2 reviews plus the editor's letter, I just numbered them. So one of the suggestions was to change a definition. I would write that down. And so when I was finished, I had 21 things I needed to do. There were 21 what I viewed as discrete tasks I needed to do. And so you can see the picture of my hand numbering and then a list. Some of the notes on here, for those that are just listening and not looking at it, some of the notes have lots of little subnotes under them. And then some of the notes are just a single sentence or a phrase, like change this term or something like that. So that's the first step before I even went to Asana. And at this point, to be fair, I didn't even know I was going to use Asana after that. I was just doing what I normally do, which is just try to make sense and sort through the revisions. And I do this definitely by hand with a pen and the, printed out feedback from the reviewers, only because I don't like to be near my computer, because then I'm tempted to address something immediately. And maybe where I'm thinking I want to put it initially, maybe one of these changes initially, is not where it really should go. So this is where I think Asana really comes in handy. But what I did was I opened up Asana. So I downloaded it and opened it up. I don't have that on these screenshots because I wanted you to see what I actually did. And I was able to start a project and title it something. So my project is for my Rhett Comp Mom's book. And so I just called it RCM Book Revisions. That's what I named my project. And then in the picture that I'm showing on screen, my paper tasks are sitting right next to my laptop. And so in Asana, you can set up different views, which I'll show in a minute, but I started with a view where it just made a task list. And so all I did was start transferring my 21 tasks into this task list. So I worked from paper to enter in that revision. Then what I ended up doing, because in Asana and on the screen, I'm showing this right now, it permits a lot of different views. So anybody watching YouTube, you can see me circling these, but audio folks, definitely check out the YouTube for this. But essentially you can look at all your tasks in a bunch of different ways. If you like it in a list, like a bulleted list kind of thing, you can do that. If you want to show it in boards, as Trello does, they look like little note cards, you can do that. You can do them by due date in a timeline view. You can do them in a calendar view. There's many, many ways to look at this. But because the default was a list view in Asana, for me, I just used that because I didn't know what I was doing. So what I ended up doing was I just started listing tasks here. And so one of the comments from both of my reviewers was that I needed to spend more time defining women, mothers, and motherhood. Which was a fair criticism. And I absolutely agreed with the feedback. And I knew I needed to do that, especially after, taking some time away from the manuscript. So I knew that had to be in there. There's also all kinds of other feedback. So some of the things were small, some of them are larger. And the nice thing about this to-do list on Asana is it's very mobile. So I could move things around, and I decided I really need to move the two major changes to the top of the list. So this is one time where I think this really, an Asana tool or any kind of project management probably outweighs pen and paper, because my list that I wrote out is static, and I have, numbers 1 through 21, they're on paper, they're kind of in an order that can't really be changed, even though I could work on them in a different order. But here I could list them and then move up what I would consider the big theoretical changes. And again, I talk a lot about approaching a revise and resubmit from this mindset in episode 44. So it's just a couple back if you want to check it out. And so I moved my major things to the top. So that was maybe the first thing that I did, which was very helpful, because obviously I think most of us listening to this podcast probably realize that when you're doing a revision, if you change some of the big things, some of the little things may not need to be addressed, or if you do need to address them, they might not be in the same spot where they were before. So at least for me, I try to think about things when I'm doing a revise and resubmit, where I'm looking at what can go across the whole manuscript, what can't. So those two things I know have to go all the way across the manuscript. My other one was about just redefining some categories. And what happened in the process of putting the stuff into Asana, all my 21 tasks, I ended up with just 10. And here's the thing where I think Asana or possibly Trello, I haven't tried it, so I don't know, really does a good job, because as I was sorting them and moving them around, it forced my brain to think about, are these three tasks the same thing, really? Could they be subtasks of each other? Are they about a bigger thing? And I found that many of the tinier things I needed to do actually belonged to another task. And so even though I probably didn't cut down on the amount of work I need to do in the revision, it is far more organized that I'm really looking at these discrete pieces versus 21 random tasks that I just check off when I do them. And here's the thing, I think that a lot of people approach a revise and resubmit that way, where they look at the revisions and they just cross them off one by one as they do them, or they go for the easiest things first and then go for the harder things. Asana really changed how I think about it, where I go for the bigger conceptual things first, or things that have to go through the entire manuscript first. So I was already doing that, but this also helped me just condense down to 10 and really think about, well, what does this revision mean? Where does it go? Does it belong to any of the other tasks I already have? So that was fantastic. Plus I could reorder them in the order I want to work on them. So the other thing that I like about Asana is that in the notes, you can expand them. So what I'm showing on screen is if I click on one of my notes, it opens up and I can write all kinds of little subtasks underneath. And what I ended up doing, at least in one case with one of my reviewers' comments, I wanted to push back on a criticism that I had about that book project. And so basically, I just set up some of my rebuttals to that request for a change and why I would want to do that. And so I could actually start writing back to reviewers in my Asana board, which I thought was a really great way to capture this feedback, because then I will be able to pull this typewritten text and put it in my cover letter back to a revision. But I also liked it because it sort of let me think about, why don't I like this criticism and what is it I want to do about it? In another screen, I'm showing that I tried to actually, with some of the smaller tasks, work in Asana to solve a problem. So whatever it was in the list. So in one case, for example, I know I need to change category titles. And so I wrote down those new titles in there, and then I explained a couple ways to myself how I might solve a problem. So even as I was just organizing what I was doing, all those thoughts that come to you when you read a revise and resubmit and you say, hey, I think I could do that. Here's a way I might do that. In Asana, I could actually capture them, stick them with the criticism that I wanted to address, but then it's held there for me when I'm ready to work on it, and I could work on it in a more systematic way. But again, this is the same kind of information I could use for a cover letter. So I did click over to the board view just so people could see. I stayed in the list view because I honestly liked it better after I saw both of them. But the board view does work like a Kanban board. If you've ever seen a Kanban board, I will make sure that I put a link to Kanban in the show notes if you're interested in that. But essentially, it's moving Post-its across categories. So in this case, Asana sets it up for doing, done, or to do, doing, and done. Kanban works in the same kind of a way where you have sort of a backlog of projects, you have ones that are in process, and you might have different stages. So I know I've also talked about this in an article about having a project management chart where I could kind of track different stages. So this really does capture that. I just happen to like the list better. It just made more sense to me to see it. Plus, I liked it that I could move the tasks around as I saw fit. So I might change them, even though they're in an order right now. That doesn't mean that's the way they'll stay. I might move them around as I do them. So another thing you could do, and I did click here on the timeline view, I could assign due dates to these tasks, and I resisted the urge in doing that. Part of this is because the two tasks at the top of my list out of 10 are big conceptual revisions. They also require a lot of changes through the entire manuscript once I fix them. And for me, I did not want to put a due date pressure on that because I know the other 8 changes will go relatively quickly. However, I could see for somebody using this for, say, a dissertation or a project where you have a little bit more time, you might assign some due dates to make sure that you're reaching the different project stages. So I could completely see setting up a dissertation in Asana And now that I know this, I am offering this as coaching with some of the writing project management that I do for Defend and Publish. So anybody that's interested in doing coaching with me, or you want to set up an Asana project and really think about how to do this, please email me, Christine at Defend and Publish, Christine with the CH. So I want to show then what happened after I did this. So I used a writing session. My first one obviously was to write out all that feedback. My second one was to build an Asana board. And by the way, that took me 2 hours to do it with the task list that I had already written out. It took me 2 hours to learn how to use Asana and put the stuff in. The learning part took about 3 minutes, but actually typing and working with it took me longer. And then the next step was, or the next steps were a couple of things. One, I ordered some new books because, of course, new sources were recommended. I also know that I'm going to reread my entire manuscript. Now I know what 10 things I'm looking for. So I can take some notes and look for those 10 things one at a time where they're going to go. I know I still need to work in some scholarship on COVID because when I first submitted this manuscript, it was right on the cusp of when that was happening. I also look at some articles in Research Rabbit, which I'll do in another episode. But then I also wrote a note to myself about contacting some interviewees to set up a meeting. So all of those things I know have to happen now that I've actually planned this out in a very deliberate way to move forward. And then I'm going to work from top to bottom in Asana. So hopefully that gave you an overview of how somebody might use it. I am more than happy to answer more questions about it. You definitely can email me, or if you want to ask questions on Twitter, you can do that at Defend and Publish. But I also wanted to let you know about a free December webinar coming up. This episode is being released in November of 2021. So December 1st, 2021, we have a free webinar at noon Eastern Standard Time that you can find on Eventbrite. So if you just check out Defend and Publish on Eventbrite, you can see all of our upcoming workshops, many of which are free. So these free 1-hour webinars are a great way to just kind of see what we do and get some of our resources. We're happy to share those with you. And our December topic is structuring your dissertation writing, and then the different types of writing supports to make sure that you're working towards completion. So seats are going kind of fast in this one. If you want to get in there, I recommend that you sign up for one. The other thing that you can do is actually follow Defend and Publish on Eventbrite. So every time we put up a free webinar, you can hear about it first. So you can get one of those seats, because seats are limited to 100 participants. So hopefully this helps. And if you have questions about Asana, come back to me. Happy writing.